Good morning, Cleveland. Anyone ever been to Cleveland before? I know there are a few people who live here. I got to come here a few years ago, and if you haven't been to the Cleveland Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, check it out. It's great. Hi, I'm Tami Reiss. You can also call me Tami from Miami. You're now cursed to always remember that. And I am the product leader coach. Today I'm going to cover the only 3 questions you will ever need to answer anything product-related, life-related, or otherwise, and I call this product leadership made simple. It starts with what the original question for me was, which is, what do product managers do? Something I've been asked countless times. And for years, my answer has always been, product managers are the people who decide what to do next. Product managers are the people who decide what to do next. But as somebody who's taught their share of Product Management 101 courses, I've realized that there's more to how do you make that decision. So that's what these 3 questions are really about. And here they are. Where do you want to go? Where are you coming from? And where should we go next? Don't worry, you'll be able to see this slide like 12 more times, but please, my Twitter handle's in the top left. If you like something, you are my customers, this is a product, please tweet whatever it is that you like so that I know what resonates with you. And I want to be clear, these 3 questions that I just mentioned can actually be used no matter what you're trying to do. And if you want to know where they come from, if you can't tell by the background, they come from Google Maps. And I consider that a pretty good inspiration for a product. They've got over 10 billion downloads, and they're the #1 travel app of all time. So my first example of how to use these 3 questions is that I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself by using the 3 questions. So first, where do I want to go? I want to coach product people at all levels to be recognized for their strengths. How did I get here? Where am I coming from? I've done in-house and consulting product work for the last 15 plus years, and currently I focus on executive coaching for product leaders as the product leader coach, and I do corporate training for Product Institute, which is Melissa Perry's product management online course. What's next? Where am I going to go next? As Mike mentioned, I'm one of the inaugural coaches for collective coaching. And I'm also writing a children's book called What Do Product Managers Do? More on that a little later. So where are we going today? What journey am I taking you on? First, we're going to talk about how these 3 questions apply to building products. Then, we're going to talk about how you can leverage the 3 questions to be a stronger product leader. And finally, we're going to talk about the 3 questions and you, how you can apply them to any part of your life. So back to the 3 questions. Number 1, where do we want to go? Number 2, where are we coming from? And number 3, where should we go next? Don't worry, I gave you a shorthand version. Where to, where from, where next. Now let's talk about how these can be used for product. You might notice that where to is probably around the vision, where from is probably around data and analysis, and where next is the strategy. But remember, 1, 2, 3, they're in a very specific order for good reason, and we'll get into more of that. Where do we want to go? This first question is so key to making any decision. You may call it a vision, you may call it a mission, you may call it goals or objectives or outcomes or strategic intents. I don't care what word you use for it, know where you want to go. And the reason for this is because by establishing where you want to go, you help people focus. And this focus allows people to make stronger decisions that are geared towards a common goal. My personal favorite word for these is the North Star. Not only because it's navigationally minded, but also because when you think about a North Star, it's always there. So even as you divert from the path, you know where in general you're going, and no matter which team within your organization might be doing side projects or otherwise, as long as they're still heading in this general right direction, you have a good chance of being successful. I also want to emphasize, whenever we talk about a North Star, that it should be something that once you reach there, you should be able to celebrate. My 2.5-year-old, whenever we reach our destination, says, "We made it." And I want you to think about that. Where do we want to go? Not a random ARR target or otherwise. Think concretely about the people you serve. Establish a North Star metric that would make you want to pop champagne and throw confetti when you achieve it. Now, this future that we're talking about how we want to serve our customers, partners, and stakeholders, by definition is different. It's different than what we're doing right now. So when you think about this future, these goals, this vision, this mission, you have to think about, where are we now? How do we currently serve our customers? How is that going to be what we look at in order to know how we're going to do something differently? So we get to question number 2. Where are we coming from? This is the current state. Where are we right now? And Melissa Perry, in her book, Escaping the Build Trap, clearly mentions that current state must be measured before work starts towards your vision. So don't skip step number 2. Don't set up a goal and then create a strategy. Understand where you're coming from now. Whether that means you're using Amplitude for data or anything else, it means you have to understand where you are now. One of the classic ways to do this is a SWOT analysis. For those of you that are less familiar with this because you work in the modern world, SWOT has been around for decades. But what I want you to think about is that it's actually thinking about both you as a company and the market. Too often, we as product people only look towards our own strengths and weaknesses to try to fill them. What you also need to look towards is the external world. What is the market doing? What do our prospects tell us? Where are the other companies that might be potential threats? Where can they attack us? And so this internal and external analysis allows us to understand where we are coming from. When I work with the team at Wharton and their online coursework, I got the joy of working with Professor Sigelkow, and he wrote a book called Connected Strategy. But something he emphasizes is that strategic decisions are those which leverage your competitive advantages and unique strengths. So in order to create a strong strategy and make a strategic decision, first you have to understand your competitive advantages and unique strengths. So if you don't take the time to understand where you are now, you can't make the right strategy. Starting point, that's where you are now. Anyone use Google Maps on their phone? Right, that was a joke. What's the default for the starting point when you're using Google Maps? Oh, what's that? It's your current location. You have to start with where you are now. And Google can't always give you the answer about how to get from your location to your goal, but that's where product comes in. We establish strategies on how do we get from point A to point B. How do we achieve our goal based on where we are right now? And depending on where you are now, you're going to choose a different strategy. So, where should we go next? Sadly, this is where most people start, by building a roadmap or a backlog, a plan for where you want to go next without spending the time to answer question 1 and question 2. You must answer question 1 and question 2 first. Because there are actually a huge variety of options that could be the answer to where should we go next. And you have to invest a lot of time in customer discovery to understand what those are and which will resonate most with your customers and your market. And it's going to be an indirect path. It's not going to be a straight line from A to B, and there's going to be many unknowns along the way. But if you have a strong North Star because you answered question number 1, even if you take a few left turns and right turns, you will hopefully end up at your end destination. So, classic business book again, Michael Porter's Generic Strategies. These are the strategies that you could use to get to this goal that you've established. When I worked with Melissa, one of the things we established was that for tech companies, especially those in the growth stage, you're generally following one of these 3 things. Where should we go next is answered by one of these 3 options, but it's really where do we want to go? What is the next step for us? Are we trying to increase revenue in some way? Are we trying to protect our current revenue? Do we have a churn problem? No one's ever had a churn problem, I'm sure. Or are we trying to reduce costs, whether that's operational costs or onboarding costs or otherwise? And so we took these 3 primary targets and we created 16 strategies for growth. I'm not going to get into these right now. Please use the QR code. There's a whole deck you can watch on that. That isn't what I wanted to talk about. But know that these are your 16 options that you can use if you understand where you're trying to go. So when you answer where are we trying to go and where are we now, you can then say where next based on these options. Back to Google Maps. Where should we go next? If you're using Google Maps, you might have noticed that there are options. I can drive my own car, I can take a bus, I can walk, or I can even hail a rideshare with it. By the way, this is equivalent to the product management decision of build, buy, or partner. Am I going to go with somebody else on this journey? And so part of the analysis you're going to conduct about where should we go next is what is our best path forward? Are we going to do this by ourselves and build it? Should we purchase another company or a product? Should we partner with a third party? These are all the decisions we have to make as we're answering where should we go next when it comes to how are we going to create a strategy and implement it. So now I'm going to ask you a question you're not expecting. Should we open a kindergarten? So should we open a kindergarten may seem like a very odd question to ask at a product conference, but really it's exactly the same question as any other, should we add this thing to our product or service expansion question? Because what it is a leading question that makes us answer feasibility questions. We end up asking more questions like, do we have a classroom? Do we have a teacher? Blah, 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 blah. Never asking about the value of what you're trying to deliver. So, if we instead used our 3 questions for growth, where to, where from, and where next, how might that differ than should we open a kindergarten at our preschool? So, let's look at that. Where to? What's the mission of our school? What are our current vision for the future? Well, who is it that we serve? Where from? What needs of our community are unmet? What's feasible? Where next? What options for expansion do we want to explore? Not do, explore. And then go, make it happen. Test and launch services aligned with your North Star, which is that mission of the school. This can be applicable to any product, obviously. So let's switch gears to product leadership. These 3 questions, how do they apply to product leadership? What's important to think about when it comes to product leadership is that you're never supposed to answer all 3 questions. Product leadership is knowing which of the 3 questions you should answer as a product leader. I'm going to go through a few different scenarios in a second. But remember, you are never supposed to answer all 3 questions because what you're trying to do is empower teams. You want to have missionaries, not mercenaries. And if you're doing all of the answering, you're not empowering your teams. So let's look at some real scenarios. When we created the CPO Accelerator, we talk a lot about the difference as you're moving your way up to product leader. You become more of an orchestrator instead of an operator. So we're going to answer the 3 questions, where to, where from, and where next, and help you as a product leader understand when are you going to be the orchestrator, the where to, versus the operator, where next. And we're going to talk about strategic planning, product org design, and product road mapping. So if you're going through an annual strategic planning process, executive leadership is going to answer where to. Where from is going to be informed by all the different ops teams, and then product leadership's responsibility is to define where next. You have to set the product strategy for how you're going to achieve the company goals. When it comes to product org design, however, product leadership actually acts as both the operator and the orchestrator. You have to have a vision for what you want your org to be. It's going to be informed by cross-functional leadership. They're going to provide you feedback about how your team is performing or missing out on helping them out in different ways. And then there's going to be a partnership between you and engineering leadership as you create a new org design, because those need to be in lockstep. So sometimes we do things by ourselves as an operator, and sometimes we work with a partner. When it comes to a product roadmap, you are no longer the operator if you are the product leader. Your responsibility is to be the where to, in the same way the executive leadership was for strategic planning. You set out a vision, goals, objectives for the teams, and then they do research about where they're coming from and their products and what to do next. That's the responsibility of a product manager, not you anymore. We call this strategy deployment, because without the opportunity to provide a product team with a where to, they're looking at an entire map of the world. So with strategy deployment, you help them focus on a particular area. We might call this targets or objectives or frameworks or guidelines or constraints. All of these things help a product team have a much smaller landscape where they can focus on their decisions. And you want to empower them to make strong decisions. So what you're really doing is you're providing guardrails where they can make their own choices based on the information that they have. It doesn't mean that everything's going to work out perfectly. Conflicts will arise. So when your product managers and across different teams or engineering are fighting, there's going to be conflict. And so what do you do then? The number one thing you should not do is give the people an answer. Do not tell them what they should do. Instead, help align them back to the vision and goals. Bring them back to the where to. Don't act as a referee and allow them to resolve it themselves. Empower them to make a decision around what's going to be best towards that vision and goals. And if you can get them aligned, you will allow them to feel much more ownership of the decision because they actually probably know more about the data and where from than you ever will. So, my friend Adam Harmitz at VP, who's a VP over at Microsoft, created this thing that I love, the Product Leader's Serenity Prayer. So I'm going to read it to you now. Give me the patience to let current experts make the call. Give me the strength to chart new courses when patterns are shifting. And give me the wisdom to know the difference. This is what product leadership is about, knowing when you should step in or step back. Which question out of the three should you be answering? So beyond product leadership, I mentioned life earlier. What's in it for me? How am I going to help you in your everyday life? Where do these questions apply? So, you're here for career development, you're at a product professional conference. Let's talk about your career. Where do you want to go? Where are you coming from? And where do you go next? To answer these, you might establish some 5-year goals, maybe 10-year goals. For the where you're coming from, get some feedback. Have a 360. And for where do you go next, that's going to be an answer about what your next role should be. Is that within your company? Is that someplace else? Is that taking off some time? All of these things become your career as a product. But you have to answer all three questions. And don't answer the question of, should I take this job? That's, again, a feasibility question. The question you need to start with is, what are my goals? What is valuable to me? And then answer the other ones. When I do coaching, I use something called the GROW model. Goal, reality, options, and then will do. Goal, set your goal. Number 2, reality. What is your current reality, which is so key to understanding how can I get from where I am now to my goals. If you don't know where you are now, you cannot forge a path. Look at the options. Explore different options for what should be next, and then choose one and make it happen. The current reality part, that's in a 360 assessment. You can see from the feedback on this slide, some of it's going to be positive, some of it's going to be negative. Unless you understand your personal strengths and where there's opportunity for you to improve, you can never become a better leader. And when I do coaching, I talk about how if you focus on your strengths, just as Professor Sigelkow talks about for a company, whatever your unique selling propositions are, your unique value propositions, those are your skills and experience that only you as an individual bring to the table. And how can you leverage those to launch your career forward? What makes you special in the world for your company, for other companies? And what can you do to use that to move yourself forward towards your goals? You have to answer that first question first. So now let's talk about these 3 questions in generic life. Where to, where from, where next? Let's go on vacation. Everyone likes vacation. Where are we going to go on vacation? So, question number 1, where to? what are the goals of our vacation? Which of these many categories does our vacation fit into? Are we trying to relax? Are the kids coming with us? Do we get to go scuba diving for the first time in years? Or are we just looking for a change of weather to escape the cold or the heat, in my case, in Miami? Where from? What's our current situation? Do we have a particular budget? Is there a hit list of things we're trying to get to? What's our childcare situation? Is grandma available or not? What's our tolerance for travel? Safety, costliness. How long am I willing to be on a plane? How many layovers can I take? All of these things help us decide where next. Once you choose that, you can actually book your trip. So, again, you can see how these three simple questions, where to, where from, and where next, can apply to practically anything. So, where next? Lunch. I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch. And who doesn't like Winnie the Pooh? But really, where next? I want you to have this as a takeaway. Think about these questions and how they can apply to anything you're doing. Where to? Set your goals. Be goal-oriented towards problems, towards visions, towards missions, towards things that need solving. Whatever that outcome is, make it happen. Where from? Do not start marching towards that goal until you assess your strengths. It's also important to assess the opportunities and weaknesses, but know what makes you special. Whether that's your product, your team, you as an individual, what are the strengths that you can leverage to make strategic decisions towards the future? Then, where next? Choose your next step, and know that chances are it's going to be the wrong next step. You're going to have to make lots of choices and get information along the way and feedback to choose what happens next, and probably take a few missteps along the way to get to your goals. But as long as you know what your goals are, if you make a misstep, you can always return towards that North Star. When we verge off the path, when we take a small destination side trip to get a bag of potato chips, we still get back on the highway. And then finally, go. Make it happen. I cannot emphasize enough that execution is so important. Go, make a choice, and then take that next step. Make it a small step, but take that next step, make it happen, and achieve your goals. So as I mentioned earlier, one of my goals is to help product managers at all levels. And I realized there isn't very much help for the youngest of product managers. So I'm writing this book called What Do Product Managers Do? A primer for aspiring PMs of all ages and parents who aren't sure it's a real job. Anyone else have a parent that tells them they're a project manager? Cool. I'm glad I'm not alone. So this is Sue. She's our primary character. She's a product manager, and she's going to help people learn about all the buzzwords of product management, no matter what your age is. You can scan the QR code, and it'll bring you to a nice little landing page with Sue on it, so you know you ended up at the right place. And you can put in your name and email, and I'll provide you a discount when it is we launch. There's also a link there, because I decided to open source the content, for you to tell me you don't like a particular rhyme or I forgot a particular thing. I recently added a stanza about data analytics, and Marty Kagan's inspired. It's not done yet, but we're definitely making progress, and I feel more and more proud about it every single day. So please go check it out. Thank you again for your time today. Remember, where to, where from, where next, whenever it is you're thinking about any decision. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your lunch.